Hello and welcome to Sim.bc, where it right now is 10 past 1. Yeah, it is 10 past, no, oh, sorry, 11 past 1 in the morning. And today it's time for the roundup of this little project. As you might be seeing and observing all of your own, I'm a lot more calm today because the last two days have been hectic. I goofed, so to say, with the recordings, with my scheduling, with my plans. I thought that I was going to be able to have all of these different genres that I want to look at being able to be explored in each individual video over the course of a lot of days. However, what I didn't remember was that, well, tomorrow we have an SNR, which I was going to completely ignore. And the day after that it's probably going to be sort of some form of song project if my throat is up for it, right? But let's look at what we've been doing. So, without any further ado, mate, this is going to be the roundup of the latest project to date, which has been the genre project. Basically, I have been looking through from the perspective at different genres of me thinking, what if I were to sit down and write a story? What if I were to sit down and create my own book, my own movie, my own series within any of these genres? And I've had a really hard time thinking about this for years when it just comes to me thinking about it, because I don't tend to naturally, go anywhere when I don't have sort of a goal in mind. That's why it was so interesting to see that directly when I introduced the goal of making a video to the topic, ideas and creativity and new solutions just came pouring out. Sometimes in the heat of the moment itself, when I was just standing there and being like, oh, I can think about this, or I can talk about this, and this is a new interesting angle. And it's been such a productive 2 weeks, really, with this project. Now, the different genres that we have been covering, let's see if I can remember them all from the top of my head, is action. We've been looking at drama/tragedy. We've been looking at romance and comedy. We've been looking at horror and satire, fantasy and adventure, deductive/mystery. We have been looking at, I don't know if I've said adventure already, but sci-fi at least, and I think that is all the 8 of them that we've done. I'm saying all the 8 of them because I have 8 fingers up. I think that's all of them. Otherwise, you can find them in the previous videos before these ones, before this one. And I think I'm really happy with how all of this turned out. I'm really happy, as I said, with my creativity, coming up with things on the spot. I've come up with a lot of different situations that I could put each genre in. I have come up with a lot of different potential stories that I now can develop. I particularly like the Battlefield story, not Battlefield the game, but having a Battlefield the skirmish with the action story. And also simultaneously the adventure/detective/mystery/ murder investigation story that I had right in mind when I was talking about them, because those stories are they're wildly interesting in my opinion, and they're probably my top pick of genre now that I've reviewed all of them: the detective mystery and the Battlefield skirmish and the sort of adventure and treasure hunt perception and genre. Why? Well, because 2 of them are very fact-based, or when I'm going to take the approach towards creating something within them, it's going to be very facts-based. For instance, the deductive and detective story is going to be based on, well, deduction, and that is based on facts, and that's based on knowing the facts, sort of, the entire Sherlock Holmes vibes as you get from everything. And I think that's truly enjoyable. It would lead me to be able to look up new facts. It will be making me able to sort of try to incorporate these facts into a story which will make them meticulous in the way that you're supposed to unravel them. Can be very specific in the fact, and then you say, the main character knows them, or that the main character maybe have come across something similar before. I think that's very interesting, very fun, both for me and the story as it progresses, making a very diverse character in the skill set, and making me more diverse in the knowledge that me just seeking out more knowledge, which would be beneficial, so to say, because if I look up new facts and new ways of creating a story, then the story will probably become a lot better, especially since it will be grounded in something, and the suspension of disbelief would not have to be as great. It might need to be great though, or be focusing that suspension of disbelief when it comes to the setup of the story, so to say, because it would probably be something that people can't really explain, magical and so on and so forth, and then we go through deductive. No, it's actually not that. It's all based on science and meticulous skills. Same would go with the treasure hunt story that would go throughout the world, probably be heavily reliant on biology, chemistry, physics, because we're going to explore different caves and ruins and so on and so forth. I was envisioning a nation hopping duo, probably, or at least a small party of people. Was inspired by Tintin and that line of stories, I'd say, if you want to know more about the line of thought that I was putting into it, and the line of thought that I was trying to develop and going off of and being inspired by. And I think that would be equally as fulfilling for me personally, in the sense that I would go through and look up a lot of different facts and then utilizing these facts and implementing them in a story. Now, the one genre though that I mentioned now, action, that actually diverts from this is war. Now, one can still argue that no matter which genre I'm going to go into, I need to make a lot of research. Something that has become abundantly clear after making some research in all of these topics, on all of these genres, is that, well, no matter really which one I pick, there's going to be lots and lots and lots of reading, not only by me, but by other people. They're going to read my stuff, and then they're going to be handing that back to me, being like, you know what, we don't understand this. And it's going to be a lot of me reading about things that I want to incorporate. For instance, if I want to incorporate a forest, how does that forest look? What does a forest actually look like? What does a forest actually feel like? And then I'm presenting with all of these problems, and I'm just like, you know what? I need to read up on this. Something as simple as a forest, right, is probably something that you still need to actually go into detail with and make the research before you start writing about it, because some things I might say, this is true, and then when I read about it, and I'm like, oh, it's not? Okay. So there's going to be a lot of reading and research for me, no matter which genre I pick. But if I pick the action story, there's probably going to be less of that, and more of me being focused on a warband and the sensation of someone feeling truly alone, even though they're surrounded by comrades, and this sort of, well, critique, I guess, to some degree, towards war overall, that people are just being slain, used, and disposed of as trash, and really try to iron home and hit home that point and that perspective, trying to get that point of view forward, because it's something that I feel is really interesting when looking at war and just observing war from a distance, that even I can imagine that it's not that pleasant, right? That people die, they perish in huge numbers, and at that particular moment I can imagine that that's just going to be that they're just going to perish, but the war still moves on. The war doesn't just take a break because someone falls, and trying to sort of convey that message in a book, I think would be really interesting, or in any sort of story. I think that would be really interesting. It would be a great challenge, and they would probably incorporate horror in an interesting way, but an indirect way, and probably the only way that I can incorporate horror at all, right? Because as I probably made very clear in, I think it was yesterday's video, right? When I was talking about horror, I'm not very good at even talking about it. I am horribly afraid of a lot of things. And that's also going to become a problem with treasure hunt stories and treasure map stories if they're in ruins and if they're exploring different caves, because then you probably need to make it creepy and my voice is even getting scared and getting away. You probably need to present an environment where it's sort of scary, because that's one of the reasons many people can't, not only the average person can get to the treasure, you need to have the right skills, because most people would be too afraid. That's one spin you can put on it. And also in the detective story, since I was talking about making it within the confinement of a city, you can truly explain the different types and areas of a city, what a city really is, and the different problems that can be raised in different parts of a city. So it's an overarching ecosystem of a city, but different parts can be lush, whilst others can be truly horrifying. And yet again, this is sort of me trying to pick genres where I think that I could naturally implement horror in a way that I could deal with it, because I think that horror is a really interesting way, and it brings up a lot of interesting emotions when reading a story. And if you really get afraid by something that you read, then the author has made a really good job. So I think it's a good way of going about it and creating this sort of awful environment. And especially if I go about reading up on how to create this horrific environment, you can utilize that and try to convey the message that people are slain as trash in either a war, or just in a city how people are being dealt with, or in the caves of the treasures maps situation in the adventure story. You can make all of these as long as you can create a situation and an ambience that is going to be really harsh. I think that can be utilized in very many different ways and in many very different places. So that's why I'm looking into those as well. And especially if you know all of what makes a bad environment, or sort of a creepy environment, you can just switch all of those things around and you will probably have a very good environment, a really happy environment. Not always the case, but it could be a way of also looking at how do I write a good environment and an happy environment, and look into the how do I make a horror environment to make, you know, sort of see the contrast in between. Now, something that I've probably mentioned in the description down below in all of these videos is that, of course, genres aren't mutually exclusive. They tend to cross over a lot. And there are many different themes that you can pick from different genres and implement. Even though the main thematic of a story might be action, I can still put in a lot of drama, comedy, romance in order to create intrigue, character growth, and sustaining problems, or a sustaining future for that matter. But what I'm trying to look at when I look at these genres is that I want the, as I said, the overarching genre to be of the same theme, and then introducing the other genres as sort of sub themes into the book, into the story, into the movie series, whatever. But having still one genre being the overarching thing, having everything under its umbrella, and the other things being sort of presented either through different sub-characters and subplots, or by obstacles in the world that I would create. And that's just how I would like to go about it. I'm sure that many of you out there will be like, that's stupid, that's so hard, or that's stupidly easy, that's the easy way out. But anyhow, that's probably how I would like to work with genres, especially after looking at all of them and finding out that they're complex. They're really complex. Also a reason for why I need to make so much research before I start creating a story, if I were to do one, which is not unlikely, though I say. Teasing maybe for the future, but it's not unlikely that I will try at least to do so. Now though, in the end, let's try to look at the questions as they were that have sort of guided me through the entire process of making these videos. It's only fair, right? I had 5 questions on which I structured all of the videos so that I could easily have a look in hindsight at the different genres and be like, well, I've asked all of these questions, how do I rate them against each other? This was something I did internally, out of camera, so to say, off camera, and it really helped me. And I think that well, this is going to be easy to say when I'm doing it myself. I created the questions and you're blind to your own mistakes and your own flaws in most cases. But I'd like to say, if I had a say in it and anybody asked me, that they were quite good questions. I had one character question, the first one, that was very focused on what are the characters like, how many are there, is it only going to be one, are they going to be a huge party, a small party, what are the pros, what are the cons with these. Mostly in the first couple of videos, less so in yesterday's and 2 days ago's video, because I had to go through a lot, unfortunately, timing and planning and all of that. But I like that sort of, what do the main character gravitate towards? What's the sort of MacGuffin that will be presented here? And then when you have that established, I moved into the second question, which was about, well, now that we know the characters, we know the amount of characters, we know what they want to gravitate towards, what physical confinement would you like to put these characters in that actually makes sense? And once you have that figured out, you can be like, well, with these characters in that physical confinement, let's go on to question number 3, which is what sort of obstacles and problems can you create in this environment that you presented me with? Maybe you have an apartment with 5 to 6 characters in it. Now, what problems can you make for the main character or main characters in this specific situation, given that they're gravitating towards some form of thing, the overarching theme is one, and the physical confinement is one. They're very close to each other, maybe in an apartment. What can you do with that? I think it was an interesting way of introducing those 3 questions on a row, and that was probably the meat and potatoes of all of the videos, the sort of the interesting stuff to actually get into. The 4th question was just to help me really push myself to think, well, I have all of these things, and it's going to be really hard to nail down the specific direction I want to go with this in, so I need to sort of have a target audience in mind, which is what question number 4 is all about. Identifying the target audience. And based on the characters that I presented in the physical confinement, I presented the different lessons that I might wanted to persuade to the reader, and sort of the problems that I wanted to produce as a what should we say, a consequence of the lessons that I wanted to present was, well, in what way am I going to present these? Who would it make sense to actually target this with? And then we can tailor future obstacles and future lessons and future things and bases of knowledge around that. And I think maybe that's probably the one question where I'm a bit unsure of why it was placed there. I know particularly for myself specifically that I placed it there because I want to go through the questions 1, 2, and 3 and see where I was going naturally and saying, oh yeah, it fits into kids, tweens, teens, young adults, or senior citizens. Oh, it's probably for senior citizens then, based on the amount of prior knowledge that I would assume you to have going into this sort of type of story that I'm presenting right now. However, you could say that you would have this first and then work your way through and being like, oh, so now that I know I'm going to write a kid's book, how am I going to introduce characters for a kid's book? But I would say let my creativity and my imagination for what the story is going to be determine who is going to be the target audience and sort of the level and the nature of the language for the story. I thought that was an interesting way, or I thought that was the best way of going about it for me personally. You might critique it. Otherwise, if you don't have any preference, I would suggest you to try it out. And number 5 was, how much enjoyment would I get out of creating something within this thematic genre? This is the key question though. I mean, even though the other things have been the meat and potatoes, 1 to 3, and number 4 is more like, well, marketing potential, where do we actually lay the level of the language, the prior knowledge, and so on and so forth. This was the most interesting and most important question for me personally, because this is sort of what the entire project is all about. How much enjoyment would I get out of creating a story within a specific genre as the overarching theme, and then pick that and actually try to make a story out of it. That's sort of what I want to do. So this was really important for me. It was unfortunately left to like the last 3 minutes to 60 seconds, sometimes even less, yesterday and that day before that, with double genre videos, where I was just thinking, do I actually get any enjoyment out of this? And the ones that I scored the highest was probably the adventure and detective, that's what you say. Yeah, I was thinking deductive all the time. Detective and action stories. Might be because I tend to gravitate towards those themes a lot more. I wouldn't naturally have said detective and treasure story and adventure story before this. And actions, because there might have been too hard, but after looking through them and doing some research on them, I think that could be an interesting experience to actually write something and create something within that that confinement and that theme. Once action, I was like, oh, I'm sick of action. That's all I bloody write about, because I've been writing books before. Some finished and some are not, let's say. But I've been writing books and stories before, and action, especially when I was younger, was a heavy theme of it. But I think that the way I was going to go about the action story right now was more the theme around the character, and then the character actually dealing with something entirely different within the theme, the story, and the world of an action-packed environment. And that's probably why I picked it as well. So those are the 3 candidates I have right now. Moving forward into picking which one I would do, I'll probably announce it in the future in what you probably can enjoy being video 366. Yeah, there is going to be one after the 365 mark. Anyway, I'm seeing my DSLR is annoying me as always, and has done over the last project a lot of times, which is that I only have by now 10 seconds left of the video. Thank you all for those of you who have been watching the project. I hope that I inspired you to look through these genres in this specific way yourself, and have a nice one, mate. See you, bye.